Alexander the Great. He lived 2,300 years ago, and he conquered with his army great areas from Macedonia down over through Syria, Babylon, Persia, Egypt, up to India. Now, he was born in the year 356 before Christ in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, that is east of Greek, at the Mediterranean Sea in the eastern part, northern eastern part. His father, King Philip, had conquered Greek, and his mother was Olympus, and she had told him that he was the descendant of Achilles. Achilles is a figure, a very heroic warrior figure from the Iliad, a book written some 100 years earlier. If it is true, the story written in the Iliad, if Achilles existed or not, is not completely clear. But she was telling him that he was the descendant of his very glorious, very, very important warrior. And now, when he was 20, his father was murdered, and he became king. And he could sustain his power. He became a fixed figure. In the year 334, he went over the Bosporus, so Macedonia is where the western part of Istanbul is today, over into today's Turkey. And when he conquered, within a year he had conquered Persia, pretty much where Iran today is. He also went in 331 to Egypt, and in Egypt he became the pharaoh. Then he founded the city Alexandria, very much at the northern part at the coast. And he went there to an oasis called Ziva, and there was someone telling him that he was a descendant of Zeus. That is a mythological religious god figure. Now he went on with his army conquering more. In 327 he married a Bactrian princess called Roxane. Now he went on and he also conquered more to Afghanistan region today, up to Pakistan, to the Indus, up to India. When in 325 they went back. They also went to Babylon, and they were also finished off the Babylonian king, and he became also the ruler. Up to India and then back over the seaside, the Indus River down, pretty much where Pakistan is today, down, and then over the coast back to Babylon, in the southern area of today's Syria, around that region. And there are also some other things. Now, when he came back to Babylon, within a year he fell ill and died. Now, there are some other things. One thing is his type of military tactics. He was using the phalanx, so the people had very long spears, some meters long, and good shields, and they were fighting together, and they could withstand cavalry attacks, so horse attacks, and they could very good fight with them. That was one key thing why he could conquer so much and so fast in just 9 years. He had a tutor called Aristotle, and at one incident there was a horse, Pacephalus, and it was said that that horse can't be tamed, can't be ridden, but he tamed it. When Gordium, that is in the center of Turkey, pretty much, there was the Gordian knot, and it was said, who can untie this knot conquers Asia. He took a sword and sliced it, according to a legend. Now, and that is according to Miles Kell's World History on page 156 and 157. Cleopatra. She was the queen of Egypt. There's the Mediterranean Sea between Europe and Africa, and there's Egypt in the northern part of Africa. And she was there 2,000 years ago, the queen of Egypt. In the year 51 before Christ, she became the queen of Egypt. Now, she was the last descendant on the throne of Egypt of the Macedonians, of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, he had a general called Ptolemy, and she was the descendant of him. After Alexander the Great has died, Ptolemy became the ruler. Now, she became at the same time queen as also her brother became king, but he drove her out. His name was also Ptolemy, her brother's name. He drove her out, and he seized with power. But then Julius Caesar helped her to come back onto the throne in Egypt. Now, and she was with Julius Caesar as a couple, and they had a son called Caesarion. She moved to Rome with Caesarion and lived there where also Julius Caesar was living. So Rome is in the northern part of Europe, is Egypt, and 600-700 kilometers north is now Italy. And we were living there, but then in the year 44 before Christ, so she was at that point for 7 years queen of Egypt, where Caesar was murdered. And there broke a civil war out, and she went probably back to Egypt. And there was now another person, Mark Antony. Mark Antony had 3 children now with Cleopatra. And he was for political reasons married to Octavia, who was the sister of the Roman Emperor then Octavia. And then later when Octavian was the actual empire, when he had the name Augustus Caesar. And now they tried to get power, Mark Antony and Cleopatra. They tried to rule the Eastern Roman Empire. And they didn't, because in the Battle of Actium in the year 31 before Christ, their armies were defeated off the coast of Greek. That is now, there's Egypt, there's Italy, and there's Greek. And they both fled then to Egypt, and Cleopatra spread the rumors that she was dead, probably to flee. And Mark Antony was in despair about it, tells the story, and so he committed suicide. He died, according to the story, in her arms. Now Cleopatra tried to make peace with Octavian. Augustus won the ruler of the Roman Empire, but it didn't work out, and so she laid an asp, according to the story, an asp, which is a poisonous snake, onto her breast, and then died of its poison of the snake. Octavian wrote about her, and he described her as a wicked temptress, and that description stuck then in many people's mind, but he was an enemy of her. And also, now there's a legend told that at one time she was delivering herself rolled up in a carpet to Julius Caesar. But it's not clear if it actually happened. Now, whatever the truth, now, the people in Egypt thought of her as a great and good queen. That is according to world history on the page 162 and 163. Food during the ancient times. 1.5 million years ago, at Swartkrans in South Africa, there were people that was discovered using fire to cook. So there was fire used 1.5 million years ago. And then also 20,000 years ago, there was in the region of Ukraine the first usage of hot coals in a pit. And then also 5,000 years ago, that was then improved in Egypt and by the Sumas to make it with actually ovens. And also the Egyptians at that time were able to ferment bread and making a dough and bake food. And bread was also the first processed food. Now, already 20,000 years ago or more, people were having grain seeds together with water cooked to make gruel or porridge. And when they discovered 20,000 years ago that they can make them on flat hot stones to make pita, a form of bread. Now, 13,000 years ago, pottery was developed, and in Japan, people were using that 11,000 years ago in Iran. And they could now make liquids, they could make stew. The Romans 2,000 years ago, they could go to popina shops, and there they could buy bread and cheese and fruit and meat. Now, 12,000 years ago, where the people started to let milk ferment to make cheese and grapes to ferment to make wine. 10,000 years ago, the first humans were holding animals to have meat from the animals, and also they were now planting, they were doing agriculture, they were doing farming, they started to farm. 6,000 years ago in the region of Palestine, people had olive trees, and out of the olives, they were making olive oil. And also the Egyptians, they had also bees, and they were now making honey from the bees to sweeten, and also out of fruits they were making syrup. And the Assyrians in the region of Iran, they had made 4,000 years ago the first known receipt book with 20 receipts in it. And that is according to Mayaskell's World History book on the page 146 and 147. Howard Carter, an archaeologist. In 1922 did he discover the Tomb of Tutankhamun. Now in Egypt there is the Valley of Kings, and there are 62 pharaohs buried. It's the river near Luxor. And all these grave sites were plundered except for the one which Howard Carter found in 1922. They needed 3 years to clear the nth room, but when they came through it, and they came into the actual burial chamber, we found a lot of treasures, carved animals and golden chariot wheels, and also the sarcophag. Now the innermost coffin, one of the coffins, the third coffin, was out of over 1 ton of pure gold of Tutankhamun. So a lot of treasures in this burial chamber. But there are rumors of a curse, because Howard Carter had a pet canary, and that canary was tragically, in the moment when they opened the tomb, eaten by a cobra, and the cobra is the symbol of a pharaoh. Now, and that all is according to Miles Kell's World History book, page 108 and 109. The family tree of Atum, the Egyptian sun god. Atum, he has a daughter, and her name is Hera. And she could take the form of a cobra and of a lioness, and she could punish and fight on behalf of Atum and punish his enemies. And she was also not just his daughter, but also his wife. Then he had a son, his name is Osiris, and he was the king of Egypt at the time, and then he became the king of the underworld. And Osiris has a brother, his name is Sheth, and he represents evil. He tried to make a plot to murder Osiris to get the throne. Osiris has a sister, not just a brother Seth, but also a sister called Isis, and she is the mother of fertility. And Isis is not just the sister of Osiris, but also the wife of Osiris. And Osiris has a son called Horus, and he inherited the throne of his father Osiris of Egypt. And it was believed that the pharaohs are the descendants of Horus, and therefore the pharaohs are gods. And that is according to World History on the page 48 and 49.
The three The Mummy movies of the 2000s are The Mummy from 1999, The Mummy Returns from 2001, and The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Empire from 2008.
The Pharos of Alexandria. That is a lighthouse which stood at Alexandria in north of Egypt, 2,300 years ago. Now, Alexander the Great had conquered Egypt in 432 before Christ. He became the pharaoh of Egypt, and he founded the city Alexandria. And it became a chief port. And now there is a little island a bit into the Mediterranean Sea of a harbor of Alexandria, and on that Pharos of Alexander, that Pharos of Alexandria was built under the order of King Ptolemy II of Egypt to the Greek architect Sostratus. And it is said that it was 130 meters high. At the top there was a big brazier with a fire burning day and night, and it was said that ships 40 kilometers away could still see the fire. Very much at the top they said that there was a mirror, and it is said that people could see in that mirror what was happening on the other side of the Mediterranean Ocean in Turkey, in Istanbul, in Constantinople, in Asia Minor. Now, and how did it look? There's one version, and that version says it are 4 towers on top of each other, each one smaller. Another version says it is a squared base, and then octagonal in the middle, so 8 sides, and then a circular at the top. Now, it stood there for 900 years, when the city changed its ruling person and people, and now there was then the Caliph Al-Walid, and there was a spy sent by, according to a story, a spy sent by the Emperor of Constantinople to the Caliph Al-Walid, and telling him that there was a fabulous treasure buried underneath the Pharos of Alexandria. Now, according to the story, they started to dig for it, and only when all was already basically destroyed and reconstruction impossible, and also the mirror had fallen down and shattered, they noticed that it was a trick. That is the story. And it was still there was when an earthquake in 1375 fallen down into the harbor made. And there the white marble stones is still lying, out of which the Pharos of Alexandria, that lighthouse, was built. Now, technically only the island had the name Pharos, but when the whole lighthouse was named so, and in many languages around the world, lighthouses are called for that, because of that, Pharos. That is according to Wonders of the World by Lionel Gregson on the page 70. The Pyramids of Giza. Now there are three big ones. There is Cheops, Chephren, and Mycenaeus. And Giza, that is in Egypt, in northern Africa. Now, and they were built 4,600, 4,700 years ago. And these are basically the very big tombs or burial sites of pharaohs, of Cheops, Chephren, and Mycenaeus. Now, the rocks, the stones came from the Mokattam hills. They were quarried out of the stones, then brought in and then constructed there. They had no pulleys, so they were bringing them with ramps up, probably. 100,000 people is an estimation how many people worked there. 4,000 at the construction site, 69,000 when the rest doing the crawling and the of a sledge and bringing all this down there. There's also the Sphinx. The Sphinx is guarding the causeway to the Chevron, the middle pyramid. The Sphinx, that is a lion with a human head, one of Chevron. The head of Chevron is it. And no, what is where is? They have different sizes. The Cheops is the biggest one, 150 meters. The Chevron 140 meters, and the smallest one, the Museum, 70 meters. But we have the three ones of his wives in front of him, the smaller ones also. Now the Cheops, it has 50,000 square the ground. There's a 230 meters, 230 meters, 230 meters. And now the smallest one, the Museum, has just a tenth of the limestones used for the other one. They had limestone facing, all three, just the middle one, the Chevron, has it still at the top. The Museums, they had also pink granite. The Cheops has granite in the center, and it's burial chamber, and the granite sarcophagus for Cheops himself. At the south side, there is a chamber discovered in 1954 of Cheops, where his funeral worship was untouched since 4,600 years ago. Now his burial chamber. You go into the pyramid, down, there leads the staircase down into to an uncompleted burial chamber. 20 meters in, there goes a staircase upwards, when you go up. And then you come to another uncompleted burial chamber. And then you follow it through the ground gallery up to Cheops' burial chamber. 10 meters long, 5 meters high. 5 meters also, yeah, also 5, 10 meters long, 5 and 5. How were they built? No, the Mokattam hills, the quarrying, the stones, the ring there, the ramps up and so on, and 100,000 people. We take the bedrock, where we wanted to build the thing. Then we put mud at the outside, and filled the thing with water. And when we got there, I assume with a stick, and we measured that it was everywhere exactly, let's say 10 centimeters deep. And that it was basically the plan. So we went there, and made then the ground deep, that it was exactly 10 centimeters deep. We would chop it off that stone, that it is 10 centimeters deep at that place. We're going to the next place, and so on. We made all the trenches in. But when you at that place, it's 10 centimeters deep. Then we made the water away and dug all the protruding from of the stones back to exactly the form that the trenches were. Because the water is flat, and you could just have to measure how deep is the stone. Now you have it exactly flat. When we're putting these stones there, these 2.3 million iceberg Cheops, and we're weighing 2.5 tons, and they're 1 cubic meter every time. We put it there, and they just built it on top. And that Cheops has an elevation of 52 degrees. And why did we build them? There's an idea that it gave many workers work to do. The Nile has seasons where the Nile is going over there's a big river going from the Central Africa up then through Egypt and out. And where it goes through Egypt, the big Nile river can flood. And when it's flood, it takes a lot of sediments, a lot of things with it. It makes the ground good growing, I think, for agriculture. But during that season, no one can work there. The farmers cannot work there. So it was an opportunity to give the people work during the time. That is one idea. Another idea is also it gave the people a feeling of nationhood and something great to build. And I think that is all according. No, another thing is also there was the Benben, and the Benben was an Egyptian thinking that it had the form of a pyramid, that it was a symbol of a sun god, and also the Sphinx with the head of Chevron, the lion thing. That was carved into solid rock. That were not rocks from the Mokattam, it's like the pyramids. That was into solid rocks. That was also adorned as a sun god. Maybe that was the reason. And that is according to, Grixon's Wonders of the World book on the pages 18, 19, 20, and 21. The Sphinx. The Sphinx is in Egypt, which is in northern Africa, and it is in Giza, where also the pyramids are, the great pyramids, the one of Cheops, Chevron, and Museums. And it is 70 meters long and 20 meters high, and it is a lion with a human head, and the head is the portrait of Chevron. And that Sphinx, with a portrait of Chevron as the human head, guards the causeway leading to the pyramid of Chevron, the middle one, with a limestone still on the top. And it was later worshipped as a sun god, and it is carved into living rock. That is according to Lionel Grixon's Wonders of the World book on the pages 19, 20, and 21. The Tomb of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was a pharaoh of ancient Egypt from 1347 until 1339 before Christ, so around 3,500 years ago. And from the age of 10 to 18 was he dead. And he was buried in the Valley of Kings as 62 other pharaohs, he's one of them probably, in the Valley of Kings near Luxor in Egypt at the river Nile. And his tomb is the only one which was not plundered over the time. It was discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, an archaeologist. And they discovered it when they needed 3 years just to dig through the anteroom. And there already in the anteroom they found much treasures. They found fabulous beds and chests and golden chariot wheels. And then they came then in the burial chamber, where they found then 3 shrines out of gilded wood. And inside of these 3 gilded wood shrines, they found then 3 coffins. The first one a red sandstone coffin. So 4 shrines out of gilded wood, then a red sandstone coffin, a red sandstone sarcophagus, and then 3 more coffins. And the innermost coffin was out of more than 1 ton of pure gold. And then they found in it a fabulous gold mask, and on the fabulous gold mask, there is the cobra, the symbol of a pharaoh also. That comes important in a moment. And then the remains of Tutankhamun. And there we discovered that Tutankhamun was murdered because his skull showed signs of hammer blows to the head. Now, and also there was then more treasures in other parts of this whole tomb. In the moment when they opened the burial chamber, there the pet canary of Howard Carter was eaten by a cobra, a snake. And the cobra, as I said, is the symbol of a pharaoh. And that spread rumors of a curse on the people who entered the burial chamber of the tomb of Tutankhamun. And that is according to Miles Kell's World History, page 108 and 109. Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was 10 when he became the pharaoh of Egypt, ancient Egypt, and he was then for 8 years just pharaoh from 1337 until 1339 before Christ. He was murdered with hammer blows to his head. And his parents were Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And he was married to his half-sister, Ankhesenamun. And after he had died, he was buried in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor at the Nile in Egypt. And there, at the Valley of Kings, there are 62 pharaohs and other high officials buried. And his tomb, Tutankhamun's tomb, was the only one which was not plundered over the time. In 1922, it was discovered by the archaeologist Howard Carter. And they worked on for 3 years to dig through the anteroom of his burial place. And when they opened it, they not only found lots of worthy things, lots of gold things, lots of treasures, carved animals, and fabulous beds and chests and golden chariot wheels. Also at that moment, where the pet canary of Howard Carter was eaten by a cobra. And the cobra is the symbol of a pharaoh, and it also spread rumors of a curse on the people who entered the tomb of Tutankhamun. And just for example, for the richness of things, the third innermost coffin of Tutankhamun was out of more than 1 ton of pure gold. And that is according to Miles Kell's World History book, page 108 and 109.